The gun pressed against his temple. John McAfee spun the cylinder and pulled the trigger. The empty chamber spared his life that day in Belize. But the man who had built an empire on fear was playing a deadlier game than Russian roulette. He was challenging the very systems of power he once helped create. Before his mysterious death in a Spanish prison cell, before international manhunts across tropical jungles, before presidential campaigns and cryptocurrency schemes, John McAfee created something that would touch nearly every computer on the planet. His name became synonymous with protection in the digital age. Yet the man behind that legacy remained an enigma, wrapped in contradiction. Was he a visionary genius or a dangerous provocateur? A libertarian hero or a fugitive running from his demons? The boy who grew up scanning for danger became the man who saw the digital apocalypse coming before anyone else. He built an empire on our fears, then spent the rest of his life running from his own. In the shadowy realm where technology meets rebellion, one man's journey would define an era of digital security while simultaneously challenging every convention of modern society. This is the story of a man who protected millions from invisible threats, yet could never escape the ghosts that haunted him. John David McAfee entered the world on September 18, 1945, born on a US Army base in England. The son of an American father and British mother, McAfee's early life was defined not by privilege, but by terror. Behind closed doors in Salem, Virginia, young John's childhood unfolded in the shadow of fear. His father, an abusive alcoholic, created an environment where violence could erupt at any moment. "I spent my childhood living in fear," McAfee would later recall. A beating could happen at any time, for any reason or no reason at all. The sound of my father's footsteps on the creaking floorboards would make my heart race. The wooden floors of their modest Virginia home became a warning system for young John, each groan and creak, signaling potential danger. At night, he would lie awake, listening to the sounds of his father's drunken rage echoing through the thin walls. The nightmare reached its devastating conclusion when John was just 15 years old. His father took a gun and ended his own life. This traumatic event would cast a shadow over McAfee's entire life, a psychological wound that never fully healed. What impact does such profound childhood trauma have on a brilliant young mind? How does a boy who lived in constant fear grow into a man who seemed to fear nothing, or perhaps feared everything so deeply he spent his life in perpetual motion? "The trauma of my childhood taught me to be hyper-vigilant," McAfee once confided. "I learned to scan for threats constantly, to anticipate danger before it materialized." In many ways, that's exactly what I did with computer viruses. Decades later, I saw the threat coming when others were blind to it. Despite the chaos of his early years, McAfee's intellectual gifts were undeniable. Mathematics became his sanctuary, a world of pure logic and elegant solutions, far removed from the unpredictable violence of his home life. "In mathematics, there is certainty," McAfee would later explain. 2 plus 2 always equals 4. There are rules that never change, patterns you can trust. When you grow up in chaos, that kind of predictability becomes precious. In 1967, he earned his bachelor's degree in mathematics from Roanoke College in Virginia. His academic journey continued at Northeast Louisiana State College, where he pursued doctoral studies until a relationship with an undergraduate student who would become his first wife led to his expulsion. Sound of early computer systems, the hum of large mainframes, the clicking of punch cards. The late 1960s marked the dawn of the computer age, and McAfee found himself at the vanguard. From 1968 to 1970, he worked as a programmer for NASA during the Apollo program, a young mathematician, helping to calculate humanity's path to the stars. The environment at NASA during this era was electric with possibility. Programmers worked through the night, sustained by black coffee and the knowledge that their calculations would guide men to the moon. The constant hum of early computers provided the soundtrack to humanity's greatest technological achievement. "At NASA, I learned that technology could accomplish the impossible," McAfee later recalled. "We were sending men to the moon with less computing power than you'd find in a modern toaster. It showed me that with the right application of mathematics and logic, there were no limits. his technical brilliance propelled him. A software designer at Univac, operating system architect at Xerox, and software consultant at Computer Sciences Corporation. By the early 1980s, he had secured a position at the defense contractor Booz Allen Hamilton, followed by Lockheed Martin in 1986. It was at Lockheed where McAfee's destiny would take its pivotal turn. In 1986, a new kind of threat emerged from the digital shadows. The brain virus, considered the first computer virus designed for personal computers. While others saw merely a technical curiosity, the first harbinger of a digital plague that would soon sweep across the connected world. Where did this insight come from? Was it McAfee's mathematical genius that allowed him to extrapolate the future of digital threats? Or was it perhaps his intimate familiarity with fear, the child who grew up scanning for danger, now the man who could sense it lurking in lines of code? When you've spent your childhood anticipating violence, you develop a sixth sense for threats others can't see, a former colleague observed. John could look at a piece of code and immediately identify vulnerabilities, almost like he could feel them. It wasn't just technical skill, it was almost primal. In 1987, working from his home in Santa Clara, California, John McAfee created something revolutionary. VirusScan, the world's first commercial antivirus software. He established McAfee Associates to market his creation, pioneering not just a product, but an entire industry built around digital protection. The technical innovation behind VirusScan was remarkable for its time. Unlike previous approaches that focused on specific, known threats, McAfee's software implemented a heuristic scanning system, essentially teaching computers to identify suspicious behavior patterns rather than just looking for known virus signatures. McAfee's software operated by monitoring changes to executable files, boot sectors, and system memory, the primary infection vectors for early viruses. When it detected unauthorized modifications to these critical areas, it would alert the user and offer to quarantine or remove the suspicious code. This approach allowed VirusScan to detect previously unknown threats, a revolutionary capability at a time when most security measures were reactive rather than proactive. McAfee's approach was as brilliant as it was controversial. By raising awareness, some would say stoking fears about the dangers lurking in the digital realm, he created both the problem and the solution in the public consciousness. His software became one of the first products distributed over the nascent internet, spreading almost like the very viruses it was designed to combat. The strategy worked spectacularly. By 1990, McAfee was earning $5 million annually. By 1992, the company had incorporated and launched its initial public offering. John McAfee had transformed from a brilliant programmer into a wealthy tech entrepreneur, a metamorphosis that would only be the first of many reinventions. In August 1993, at what seemed the height of his success, McAfee made a surprising move. He stepped down as chief executive, remaining only as chief technical officer. By 1994, he had sold his remaining stake in the company that bore his name, walking away entirely from the empire he had built. What drives a man to abandon his creation at the moment of its greatest triumph? Was it foresight? Restlessness? Or something deeper, perhaps? The same impulse that would later drive him to flee countries, authorities, and possibly his own demons. I think that it's when we step out of the road, step outside the box, become our own person, and we walk fearlessly down paths other people wouldn't look at, that true progress comes, McAfee would later reflect. But there was another, more troubling possibility. Had the boy who grew up in fear created a company that now triggered those same feelings? Had McAfee built a digital fortress only to find himself trapped within it? The founding of McAfee Associates marked only the beginning of John McAfee's extraordinary journey. The mathematical prodigy who emerged from a traumatic childhood had created something that would protect millions of computers worldwide. Yet in the decades to come, he would transform into one of technology's most colorful and controversial figures, a man who would repeatedly reinvent himself as entrepreneur, fugitive, presidential candidate, and digital prophet. From these beginnings would emerge a figure who defied categorization, a digital security pioneer who would later mock his own creation, a millionaire who would lose and remake fortunes, a man who would flee across continents pursued by authorities and his own restless nature. Mathematician, programmer, entrepreneur, the digital outlaw was just beginning to emerge. Was McAfee's genius in identifying digital threats or in creating the fear of them? And at what point did the salesman begin to believe his own pitch? In the digital wilderness of the late 1980s, as personal computers began their silent invasion of homes and offices across America, an invisible threat was spreading. Computer viruses, once merely theoretical constructs, had become real, multiplying across floppy disks and nascent networks like a digital plague. While the world remained largely oblivious to this emerging danger, one man recognized not just the threat, but the opportunity it presented. John McAfee wasn't just selling software, he was selling protection in a new frontier, where danger lurked in every downloaded file and shared diskette. How does a mathematician with a troubled past transform himself into the high priest of digital security? And what happens when the very empire he builds becomes a prison of his own making? The birth of McAfee Associates in 1987 was unlike any traditional business launch. There was no grand office, no team of developers, no venture capital, just John McAfee, working feverishly at his home in Santa Clara, California. The first version of VirusScan was written in a marathon coding session that, according to McAfee's own accounts, lasted nearly 48 hours. Fueled by coffee and an almost obsessive determination, he created not just a piece of software, but the foundation of an entirely new industry. "I knew we were facing something unprecedented," McAfee later recalled. These viruses weren't just technical curiosities. They were the first wave of what would become a digital pandemic. Someone had to build the vaccine. McAfee's business model was as revolutionary as his software. Rather than selling VirusScan through traditional retail channels, he released it as shareware-free for individual users, but requiring payment from businesses. This approach allowed the software to spread rapidly across the nascent internet, carried from one computer to another by the very users it protected. The timing was perfect. As personal computers proliferated throughout homes and businesses in the late 1980s, so too did the viruses that targeted them. The brain virus in 1986 was the Lehigh virus, the Jerusalem virus, the Cascade virus, each more disruptive than the last. With each new outbreak, McAfee's warnings seemed more prescient, his software more essential. He became a regular presence on news programs, explaining the dangers of these invisible threats in terms that terrified the average computer user. Is your computer safe? A new wave of so-called viruses threatens to erase your data and damage your hardware. We speak with security expert John McAfee about this growing digital epidemic. Was McAfee genuinely concerned about the threats he described? Or was he simply a brilliant marketer who recognized that fear sells? The line between legitimate warning and fear-mongering was never entirely clear, an ambiguity that would characterize much of McAfee's career. What is certain is that his approach worked. By 1990, McAfee Associates had grown from a one-man operation to a company with 50 employees, an annual revenue of $5 million. By 1992, when the company went public, its value had skyrocketed to $80 million. The IPO made McAfee a wealthy man on paper. His stake in the company was worth approximately $100 million. The mathematician, who had once worked for NASA, was now a tech millionaire, part of the first wave of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who would transform the American economy in the decades to come. But even as McAfee Associates grew into a corporate giant, signs of John McAfee's unconventional character were becoming increasingly apparent to those who knew him. Colleagues from this period describe a man of brilliant intellect and charismatic presence, but also one whose behavior occasionally veered into the eccentric. He maintained an intense, almost obsessive focus on security threats, sometimes working through the night tracking new viruses. Yet this professional paranoia seemed to bleed into his personal life as well. He began expressing concerns about government surveillance and corporate control themes that would later dominate his public persona. His management style was equally unorthodox. Former employees recall impromptu meetings that could last for hours, with McAfee expounding on topics ranging from encryption algorithms to Eastern philosophy. He rewarded innovative thinking and despised corporate bureaucracy, creating a company culture that reflected his own freewheeling approach to life and business. There were other signs too. glimpses of the more flamboyant character who would later emerge. Even in the buttoned-down corporate environment of early 1990s Silicon Valley, McAfee stood out. His office was decorated with exotic artifacts. He drove expensive sports cars. There were whispers about recreational drug use and unconventional romantic entanglements. Yet these were merely hints of what was to come, the first cracks in the facade of the respectable tech entrepreneur. By 1993, just 6 years after founding McAfee Associates, John McAfee made a decision that shocked his colleagues. He resigned as CEO of his own company. What would drive a man to abandon the helm of a successful company bearing his own name? McAfee himself has offered various explanations over the years. In some accounts, he cited frustration with the growing corporate culture and bureaucracy. In others, he claimed to have foreseen the commoditization of antivirus software and wanted to pursue new ventures. But there were darker rumors as well, whispers of erratic behavior, conflicts with the board of directors, and growing concerns about McAfee's increasingly unconventional lifestyle. We cannot make privacy extinct. Our society cannot function without privacy, McAfee would later warn, his voice taking on the tone of a digital prophet. Had he seen something in the evolution of security software that troubled him? Was his departure an act of protest, or simply the next step in a life defined by perpetual motion? Whatever his reasons, John McAfee's exit marked the end of an era, both for the company and for the man himself. McAfee Associates would continue without him, eventually merging with Network General in 1997 to form Network Associates, before returning to the McAfee name in 2004. The software would evolve from a simple virus scanner into a comprehensive security suite, becoming a fixture on millions of computers worldwide. Yet, as the years passed, McAfee himself would grow increasingly critical of his own creation. In a stunning reversal, the founder would later describe McAfee Antivirus as bloatware, ineffective, resource-hungry software that he urged users to uninstall. The man who had built an empire on digital protection had become its most vocal critic. Was this the final act of a man distancing himself from his past? Or had John McAfee glimpsed something about the nature of digital security that others had missed, that perhaps the cure had become as problematic as the disease? The departure of John McAfee from McAfee Associates in 1994 marked more than just a corporate transition. It was the moment when the digital security pioneer began his transformation into something far more complex and controversial, a tech guru turned digital outlaw. With $100 million in his pocket and no corporate responsibilities to constrain him, John McAfee was now free to reinvent himself once again. The mathematician who had built an empire on fear was about to embark on a journey that would take him to the furthest edges of technology, wealth, power, and sanity itself. I think there's more wrong than right in the security industry, because it's a business like anything, and the purpose of business is to make money and survive, McAfee would later reflect, offering perhaps a glimpse into the disillusionment that drove him from the industry he helped create. But if McAfee had grown cynical about the business of digital security, he remained passionate about the principles of privacy and personal freedom that had initially drawn him to the field. These principles would guide and sometimes misguide him through the extraordinary decades that followed. The story of McAfee Associates represents both the pinnacle of John McAfee's conventional success and the moment when he chose to walk away from it. He had created something that would outlive him, software that would bear his name on millions of screens around the world, long after he had disavowed it. Yet for John McAfee himself, this was merely the end of one chapter and the beginning of another one, filled with even greater wealth, more outlandish behavior, and increasingly desperate flights from both real and imagined pursuers. The digital security pioneer had protected millions from invisible threats, but who would protect John McAfee from the demons that drove him ever onward? What happens when a tech millionaire abandons the corporate world that made him rich? When the man who built an empire on digital fear decides to escape into a physical paradise? For John McAfee, the answer would prove as complex and troubling as the man himself. After walking away from McAfee Associates with approximately $100 million in his pocket, John McAfee embarked on a journey of reinvention. The disciplined programmer who had once worked for NASA and Lockheed Martin was now free to indulge his every whim and indulge you will. His first act was to establish a Colorado-based yoga retreat called Sacred Space, where he taught yoga and meditation. The man who had made his fortune protecting computers from invisible threats now sought to protect minds from the stresses of modern life. Yoga saved my life, McAfee would later claim. It taught me to quiet my mind, to find peace and stillness. After years of scanning for threats, I finally learned to simply be. But this period of tranquility would prove short-lived. McAfee's restless nature and entrepreneurial instincts soon led him back to the tribal voice, which developed one of the internet's first instant messaging programs, Quorum X, a manufacturer of herbal antibiotics, and Future Tense Central, focused on secure computer networks. But the financial crisis of 2008 would dramatically alter McAfee's trajectory. As markets collapsed worldwide, McAfee's fortune reportedly shrank from $100 million to just $4 million. For a man accustomed to unlimited resources, this financial contraction demanded a new strategy and a new location. In 2008, seeking both tax advantages and a simpler life, McAfee relocated to the tiny Central American nation of Belize. He purchased a sprawling beachfront compound on Ambergris Cay, a slender island off the Belizean coast. Here, surrounded by pristine waters and lush jungle, McAfee began to construct his own private kingdom. The compound McAfee built was unlike anything the local community had seen before. Spanning approximately 2.5 acres, it featured multiple buildings, a state-of-the-art laboratory, and elaborate security measures. At the entrance stood a guard station, manned 24 hours a day by armed security personnel. Inside the perimeter roamed a pack of aggressive guard dogs, more than a dozen of them trained to respond to intruders with lethal force. Was this the retreat of a privacy-conscious millionaire, or the fortress of a man preparing for war? Inside his compound, McAfee established a research laboratory for Quorum X, his pharmaceutical company. The official purpose was to develop new antibiotics from tropical plants, a noble scientific endeavor. But rumors soon began to circulate about what was really happening behind those walls. Local workers reported strange experiments, unusual chemicals, and McAfee's growing obsession with purifying compounds extracted from the jungle flora. Some claimed he was attempting to synthesize a new class of recreational drugs. Others suggested more sinister purposes. McAfee himself would later claim he was developing a female libido enhancer plant-based Viagra for women derived from a local plant called New River Rust. Whatever the truth, his behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. As months passed, McAfee's paranoia seemed to deepen. He began to surround himself with young women from the local community, some barely adults who lived on his compound as what he called girlfriends. He hired local men with criminal backgrounds as security guards, arming them with shotguns and pistols. His relationship with local authorities deteriorated rapidly. He accused the Belizean government of corruption and harassment. They, in turn, began to view him with increasing suspicion. The situation reached a critical point on April 30th, 2012, when a team of Belizean police, accompanied by members of the Gang Suppression Unit, a paramilitary force typically used against drug cartels, raided McAfee's compound. The officers stormed the property with automatic weapons drawn. They handcuffed McAfee and his entourage, shot one of his dogs dead, and ransacked the laboratory. They claimed to be searching for evidence of methamphetamine production. After holding McAfee for several hours, they released him without charges, but he was now in the crosshairs of Belizean authorities. McAfee's response was to double down. He increased his security force, installed additional surveillance cameras, and began sleeping with a gun under his pillow. He made increasingly provocative statements to the international press, accusing the Belizean government of targeting him because he refused to pay bribes. "The government wants me dead," he told reporters. "This is not about drugs or guns. This is about power and control. I've become a thorn in their side because I speak the truth about corruption in Belize." Was this the legitimate fear of a whistleblower, or the paranoid delusions of a man losing touch with reality? The answer would become even more elusive after the events of November 10, 2012, the day that transformed John McAfee from an eccentric millionaire into an international fugitive. On that morning, McAfee's neighbor, Gregory Fall, a 52-year-old American expatriate, was found dead in his home, shot once in the back of the head. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared to have been stolen. It had all the hallmarks of an execution. The relationship between McAfee and Fall had been strained. Fall had filed a formal complaint about McAfee's dogs, which roamed the beach and allegedly threatened tourists. Shortly before his murder, several of McAfee's dogs had been poisoned. An act McAfee blamed on Belizean authorities, but which others attributed to Fall. When police sought to question McAfee about the murder, they found his compound deserted. John McAfee had vanished. What followed was one of the most bizarre manhunts in recent memory. While Belizean authorities searched for him, McAfee remained in hiding, yet simultaneously conducted interviews with international media outlets, taunting the police and proclaiming his innocence. "I did not kill Gregory Fall," McAfee insisted in these interviews, "but I believe the bullet that killed him was meant for me. The government wants me silenced." To avoid capture, McAfee claimed to have employed elaborate disguises, dyeing his hair, darkening his skin with shoe polish, stuffing tissues in his cheeks to alter his appearance. He even claimed to have posed as a drunk German tourist, complete with a limp and an affected accent. After 3 weeks on the run within Belize, McAfee made his move. Accompanied by his young Belizean girlfriend, Samantha Venegas, and 2 journalists from Vice magazine, he crossed the border into Guatemala, a journey he would later describe in almost mythic terms. But his freedom would be short-lived. In a bizarre twist, the Vice journalists published a photo of McAfee online, with the location data still embedded in the image file. Guatemalan authorities quickly tracked him to his hotel and arrested him for illegal entry into the country. The world's media descended on Guatemala City as McAfee fought deportation back to Belize. In a theatrical twist that seemed scripted for maximum drama, McAfee suffered what appeared to be a heart attack in detention, an event some suspected was faked to delay his deportation. Whether genuine or staged, the medical emergency bought McAfee precious time. His lawyers secured a stay of deportation, arguing that returning him to Belize would put his life at risk. On December 12, 2012, Guatemalan authorities made a fateful, rather than sending him back to Belize, they deported him to the United States. As the plane carrying John McAfee lifted off from Guatemala City, bound for Miami, it marked the end of one chapter in his extraordinary life and the beginning of another. The digital security pioneer who had fled to Central America seeking paradise had instead found paranoia, violence, and ultimately, the need to flee once again. The murder of Gregory Fall remains officially unsolved. McAfee was never charged in connection with the crime, though a Florida court would later find him liable in a wrongful death civil suit brought by Fall's family, ordering him to pay $25 million in damages, a judgment he would never satisfy. The Belize saga transformed John McAfee in the public imagination. No longer was he merely the eccentric founder of a software company. He had become something more complex and troubling, a digital age outlaw, a man who lived by his own rules in defiance of conventional authority. For some, he embodied a romantic ideal of freedom and rebellion against corrupt systems. For others, he represented the dangerous excesses of wealth and privilege, a man whose money and connections allowed him to escape accountability for his actions. The truth, as with so much of McAfee's life, likely lies somewhere in the shadowy territory between these extremes, a territory McAfee himself seemed to cultivate and exploit. What becomes of a tech millionaire after he flees murder allegations in a tropical paradise? For most, such circumstances would mark the end of public life, a retreat into anonymous obscurity. But John McAfee was not most people. When McAfee landed in Miami on December 12, 2012, he stepped off the plane into a media frenzy. Rather than shunning the spotlight, he embraced it, granting interviews, posing for photographs, and spinning his Belizean adventure as a tale of government persecution and narrow escape. "I am not a madman," he insisted to reporters. "I am eccentric. I am wealthy. I am also a target." In the months that followed, McAfee transformed his fugitive status into a bizarre form of celebrity. He appeared on CNN, Fox News, ABC's Nightline, and numerous other media outlets. He gave a lengthy interview to Wired magazine. He participated in a documentary about his life called Running with the Devil. In each appearance, he portrayed himself as a whistleblower, targeted by corrupt officials, a man whose only crime was refusing to be silenced. The murder of Gregory Fall, he suggested, was either committed by Belizean authorities or was a case of mistaken identity. The killer had been aiming for McAfee himself. But even as he courted media attention, McAfee's behavior grew increasingly erratic. In interviews, he veered between lucid technical explanations and paranoid conspiracy theories. He claimed to have spied on the Belizean government using a network of hacked laptops distributed to officials as gifts. He suggested that powerful forces, perhaps even the US government, were conspiring against him. Was this the calculated performance of a master manipulator designed to distract from unanswered questions about Fall's murder? Or was it evidence of a brilliant mind unraveling under the weight of trauma, substance abuse, and paranoia? Whatever the truth, McAfee's return to the United States marked the beginning of a new phase in his extraordinary life, one in which he would reinvent himself yet again, this time as a digital prophet, warning of the dangers of the very technologies he had once championed. As the 2010s progressed, McAfee turned his attention to cryptocurrency. With characteristic flair for dramatic timing, he emerged as one of the most vocal advocates for Bitcoin and other digital currencies, just as they were beginning to enter mainstream consciousness. Blockchain technology is the greatest advancement in human history since the internet itself, he declared in interviews. It will free us from the tyranny of central banks and government control of our financial lives. At cryptocurrency conferences around the world, McAfee was received like a rock star. His speeches combined technical expertise with libertarian philosophy and apocalyptic warnings about government surveillance. He predicted Bitcoin would reach $1 million per coin by 2020, a prediction so outlandish, he promised to perform an obscene act on national television if it failed to materialize. But behind this new public persona, McAfee's legal troubles were mounting. The Internal Revenue Service was investigating him for tax evasion. The Securities and Exchange Commission was examining his promotion of various cryptocurrency projects. And his personal life continued to spiral into increasingly bizarre territory. On September 8th, 2015, John McAfee said he was running for President of the United States as the candidate of the newly formed Cyber Party. The man who had fled government authorities in Belize now sought to lead the most powerful government on Earth. "I am founding a new party yet to be announced," McAfee declared. It's the Cyber Party. In this age of communication, we have become less secure than we were 50 years ago. Our government is dysfunctional. I've been a libertarian all my life, but the Libertarian Party itself has lost touch with its roots. McAfee's initial campaign platform centered on the issue: cybersecurity and digital privacy. He warned of America's vulnerability to cyber warfare, criticized government surveillance programs, and advocated for greater personal freedoms in the digital realm. "The government is spying on us through our computers," McAfee insisted in campaign speeches. "They're reading our emails, tracking our movements, monitoring our financial transactions, all without warrants, all in violation of our constitutional rights. I know because I helped build the technology that makes it possible." Was this the confession of a man seeking redemption? Or the paranoid delusions of someone whose grip on reality had slipped during his years in the jungle? By December 2015, just 3 months after launching his Cyber Party bid, McAfee made another pivotal decision. He abandoned his fledgling party to seek the Libertarian Party's nomination instead, a move that gave him access to an established political infrastructure and a guaranteed place on the ballot in all 50 states. The 2016 Libertarian National Convention in Orlando, Florida, presented a spectacle unlike anything in mainstream American politics. Candidates ranged from serious policy wonks to performance artists, all united by their belief in minimal government and maximum personal freedom. Among them stood John McAfee, his wild hair and intense gaze, making him instantly recognizable as he took the stage for the presidential debate. "We are in a cyber war," McAfee warned the delegates. "Our security is an illusion. The government's approach to cybersecurity is a joke. China has already stolen 20 million records of government employees. We need someone who understands this threat, not career politicians who can barely operate their email." McAfee's performance at the convention was characteristically theatrical. He spoke of government overreach, the surveillance state, and the need for a digital revolution. He criticized the war on drugs and advocated for the decriminalization of marijuana. He railed against the two-party system that he claimed had corrupted American democracy. But despite his passionate rhetoric, McAfee faced stiff competition from former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson and activist Austin Peterson. When the votes were tallied, McAfee finished a distant third, securing just 14% of delegate support on the second ballot. For most failed presidential candidates, this would have marked the end of their political ambitions. But John McAfee had never followed conventional paths. His 2016 campaign, rather than representing a culmination, was merely a rehearsal for what was to come. In the years following his first presidential bid, McAfee's anti-establishment stance hardened into something approaching revolutionary fervor. His Twitter account became a platform for increasingly provocative statements about taxation, government authority, and personal freedom. "Taxation is illegal," he declared in one tweet. "I have not filed a tax return for 8 years. I have paid no taxes. I will not file, and I will not pay. If I'm arrested, so be it. But I will not participate in this charade any longer." These weren't empty words. By 2019, McAfee would claim that he was facing indictment for tax-related felonies, with charges that could potentially send him to prison for decades. Rather than face these charges, McAfee fled once again. In January 2019, he announced that he was living in exile on a boat, sailing international waters to avoid US authorities, from his floating sanctuary, which he dubbed the Freedom Boat. McAfee continued to court controversy. He posted photos of himself, armed with automatic weapons. He claimed to be pursued by CIA agents. He made cryptic references to having dirt on powerful government officials. And perhaps most surprisingly, he announced his intention to run for president again in 2020, this time conducting his campaign entirely from exile. "Don't vote for me" became his paradoxical campaign slogan. I wouldn't vote for me either. My campaign platform: how do we free ourselves from a government that no longer serves us, but instead has become our master? McAfee's 2020 campaign strategy was as unconventional as the candidate himself. Unable to appear at rallies or debates in person, he deployed surrogates, wearing masks bearing his likeness. He conducted virtual town halls from his boat. He leveraged social media to spread his increasingly radical libertarian message. The income tax is illegal, he would insist in these virtual appearances. The Federal Reserve is a private bank that has enslaved us all through debt. The surveillance state knows everything about you, your emails, your phone calls, your financial transactions, all without warrants, all in violation of your constitutional rights. As his presidential campaign unfolded, McAfee's legal troubles continued to mount. In October 2020, the Securities and Exchange Commission filed civil charges against him, alleging that he had promoted initial coin offerings to his Twitter followers without disclosing that he was paid to do so, a form of illegal pump-and-dump scheme. McAfee leveraged his fame to make more than $23 million in undisclosed compensation, the SEC complaint stated. He touted the ICO offerings as game changers and innovations, without disclosing that he was being paid to promote them. McAfee's response was characteristically defiant. He called the charges overblown and insisted they were politically motivated retribution for his outspoken criticism of the government and the IRS. Between 2017 and 2018, McAfee leveraged his fame and Twitter following of over 1 million users to promote various initial coin offerings. According to the Securities and Exchange Commission, he was paid more than $23 million in digital assets. For these endorsements payments, he never disclosed to his followers. The SEC would later charge that McAfee's recommendations were not impartial investment advice, but paid promotions. A classic pump-and-dump scheme designed to inflate prices artificially before selling his own holdings. But cryptocurrency fraud allegations were just the beginning. In 2019, McAfee made a stunning announcement on Twitter. "I have not filed a tax return for 8 years," he wrote. "Taxation is illegal." It was a direct challenge to the IRS one that would set in motion the final chapter of McAfee's tumultuous life. According to federal prosecutors, McAfee had earned millions between 2014 and 2018 from speaking engagements, consulting, cryptocurrency promotion, and even selling the rights to his life story for a documentary. Yet he filed no tax returns and attempted to hide his assets by placing them in other people's names. Prosecutors alleged he purchased a yacht, multiple properties, and vehicles through shell companies and nominees, all while maintaining a lavish lifestyle that he flaunted on social media. McAfee's response was not to hide, but to openly taunt authorities. "The IRS has convened a grand jury against me," he tweeted in January 2019. "I am charged with using cryptocurrencies in criminal acts against the US government." Lastly, "I have not filed a tax return for 8 years. I have paid no taxes. I have made no secret of it." By mid-2019, with federal indictments looming, McAfee took to the sea on his yacht, the Freedom Boat. What followed was a bizarre, often theatrical game of cat and mouse, with authorities that played out on social media in real time. From his floating sanctuary, McAfee posted photos of himself armed with assault rifles, surrounded by his security team, taunting authorities to come find him. He claimed the CIA was after him, that he had collected over 31 terabytes of data on government corruption, and that powerful people wanted him silenced. In July 2019, Dominican authorities detained McAfee and his wife Janice after finding weapons and ammunition on his yacht. McAfee later claimed he had smuggled a phone into jail and posted updates from his cell before being released and fleeing to London. "The CIA has attempted to collect us," McAfee tweeted, alongside photos of himself holding weapons. "We are at sea now, and will report more soon. I will continue to be dark for the next few days." His journey continued to Cuba, then to the Bahamas, always one step ahead of US authorities. McAfee's paranoia seemed to grow with each passing day, yet he continued to broadcast his location and activities to his followers. Was this the behavior of a man truly in fear for his life? Or was it, as some suggested, an elaborate performance, the final act in the theater of John McAfee's life? In November 2019, McAfee took his defiance to another level, getting a tattoo that read "Whacked," a reference to Jeffrey Epstein's death and McAfee's belief that powerful forces might try to silence him. Getting subtle messages from US officials saying, "We're coming for you, McAfee. We're going to kill yourself," he tweeted. "I got a tattoo today just in case. If I suicide myself, I didn't. I was whacked." As 2020 progressed, McAfee's posts became more erratic. He claimed to have created software that enabled him to spy on anyone globally, including government agencies. He insisted he had access to damaging information on various governments and threatened to release it if he was ever harmed. Was this the rambling of a paranoid mind? Or did McAfee truly possess information that made him dangerous to powerful people? The line between reality and performance art had become impossible to distinguish. On October 5th, 2020, McAfee's international flight came to an abrupt end. Spanish authorities arrested him at Barcelona's El Prat airport as he attempted to board a flight to Istanbul, Turkey. The arrest was based on an indictment filed by the US Department of Justice, charging McAfee with tax evasion and willful failure to file tax returns. If convicted, he faced up to 30 years in prison. For the next 8 months, McAfee would be held in a Spanish prison while fighting extradition to the United States. From his cell, he continued to communicate with the outside world through his lawyers and his wife Janice, maintaining his innocence and insisting that the charges against him were politically motivated. On June 23, 2021, the Spanish National Court authorized McAfee's extradition to the United States. Hours later, guards at the Bryans II Penitentiary near Barcelona found John McAfee hanging in his cell, dead at the age of 75. Spanish authorities ruled the death a suicide, But many, including McAfee's widow, Janice, rejected this conclusion. She pointed to his whacked tattoo and his repeated claims that if he ever appeared to have taken his own life, it would be murder. John was not suicidal, she insisted in a statement. His last words to me were, "I love you, and I will call you in the evening." Those are not the words of someone who is suicidal. The death of John McAfee marked the final chapter in one of technology's most extraordinary and controversial lives. From his traumatic childhood to his groundbreaking work in computer security, from his jungle compound in Belize to his years as a digital nomad on the run from authorities, McAfee had lived a life that defied convention and challenged authority at every turn. Was he a visionary genius or a dangerous provocateur? A libertarian hero or a fugitive running from justice? A truth-teller exposing government corruption or a master manipulator creating elaborate fictions? Perhaps he was all of these things and something more elusive still. In an age of increasing digital surveillance and corporate control, John, the truly independent individual, answerable to no one, bound by no rules but his own. The legacy of John McAfee extends far beyond the software that still bears his name. He leaves behind a cautionary tale about the price of freedom, the dangers of paranoia, and the thin line between genius and madness. In the digital age, where our lives are increasingly monitored, measured, and controlled, McAfee stood as both warning and inspiration, a man who saw the surveillance state coming before most of us, who built tools to protect us from invisible threats, and who ultimately chose to live and die on his own terms, regardless of the cost. "The government wants you to believe I killed myself," McAfee had tweeted in November 2019. "If I suicide myself, I didn't. I was whacked." Whether these words represented genuine fear or theatrical provocation, they ensure that, like everything else in John McAfee's extraordinary life, even his death remains shrouded in controversy and conspiracy, a final enigma from technology's most defiant outlaw. McAfee was held in Brians 2 prison, a facility near Barcelona that housed approximately 1,500 inmates. By prison standards, the conditions were relatively humane. Some even compared it to a hotel when measured against American prisons. For nearly 9 months, McAfee's life settled into the routine of prison. According to prison officials, he showed no signs of depression or suicidal behavior. He maintained contact with his wife Janice and continued to make his voice heard through his lawyers and occasional tweets posted on his behalf. But the defiant persona McAfee had cultivated for decades was being tested like never before. At 75 years old, he faced the very real possibility of spending his remaining years behind bars. In prison interviews, McAfee remained defiant. "The US believes I have hidden crypto," he said through his lawyers. "I wish I did, but it has dissolved through the many hands of Team McAfee, and my remaining assets are all seized. My friends evaporated through fear of association. I have nothing, yet I regret nothing." As his extradition hearing approached, McAfee's public statements took on an increasingly fatalistic tone. He told his Twitter followers that if he were extradited to the United States, he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Yet he insisted he was at peace with whatever came next. "I have friends all over the world," he tweeted in one of his final messages. "I am content in here. I have food, shelter, and good treatment. My only worry is that media stories about me will influence my treatment in the future. I'll be fine. Don't worry for me." On June 23, 2021, the Spanish National Court ruled that McAfee could be extradited to the United States to face tax evasion charges. Hours after the ruling was announced, guards found him hanging in his cell. The official cause of death was suicide by hanging. Spanish authorities reported that McAfee had left no suicide note and that all evidence pointed to a voluntary act of self-destruction. But for a man who had spent years warning that he would never take his own life, who had literally branded himself with a message that any suicide would be murder, his death immediately sparked conspiracy theories. In the days following McAfee's death, supporters gathered outside the prison, demanding an independent investigation. Online, the hashtag McAfee didn't kill himself trended on Twitter, echoing the conspiracy theories that had surrounded the death of Jeffrey Epstein 2 years earlier. Janice McAfee, who had been married to John since 2013, was among the most vocal skeptics of the official narrative. "I blame the US authorities for this tragedy," she told reporters. "Because of these politically motivated charges against him, my husband is now dead. His last words to me were, 'I love you, and I will call you in the evening.' Those are not the words of someone who is suicidal." Was John McAfee murdered, as his supporters claim? Or did he, facing the prospect of decades in American prisons, choose to end his life on his own terms? Like so much about McAfee's extraordinary life, the truth remains elusive, a final mystery that may never be fully resolved. Within hours of McAfee's death, the internet exploded with speculation. The most prominent theory suggested that McAfee was silenced by powerful government agencies, the deep state he had railed against for years. Proponents pointed to his repeated claims that if he ever appeared to commit suicide, it would be murder. Adding fuel to the conspiracy fire, shortly after his death was announced, McAfee's Instagram account posted a plain image of the letter Q, a symbol associated with the QAnon conspiracy movement. Though the account was quickly deleted, screenshots spread rapidly across the internet, suggesting to some that McAfee had been involved with or had information related to QAnon's theories about government corruption. Another theory claimed that McAfee possessed damaging files on government officials or other powerful figures, information he had allegedly stored as an insurance policy. Some versions of this theory suggested he had hidden data in various locations, including a supposed condominium in the Champlain Towers in Surfside, Florida, a building that collapsed just days after McAfee's death. Fact-checkers have thoroughly debunked this claim, finding no evidence that McAfee owned property in the building. McAfee's widow, Janice, has been vocal in her skepticism. She has continued to question the circumstances of his death and demand further investigation. When we examine the evidence dispassionately, what do we find? Spanish authorities conducted an autopsy and concluded that McAfee died by suicide. No evidence of foul play was discovered during the investigation. McAfee was 75 years old, facing extradition to the United States on charges that could have resulted in decades of imprisonment, a prospect he had publicly stated he could not bear. Yet McAfee's own words haunt this conclusion. In addition to, "If I suicide myself, know that if I hang myself, a la Epstein, it will be no fault of mine." These statements, while dramatic, were made during a period when McAfee was actively cultivating a larger-than-life public persona and facing mounting legal troubles. Forensic psychologists note that public declarations against suicide don't necessarily preclude the possibility. The combination of advanced age, legal jeopardy, potential lengthy imprisonment, and the sudden collapse of hope following the extradition ruling created a perfect storm of risk factors. What appears as contradiction to the public may reflect the complex, changing mental state of a man facing the end of his freedom. Beyond the controversy surrounding his death lies McAfee's undeniable impact on technology. In 1987, he created the first commercial antivirus software at a time when most people barely understood what computer viruses were. This pioneering work helped establish cybersecurity as a fundamental component of computing, transforming it from an obscure technical concern into a household necessity. McAfee's approach to cybersecurity was revolutionary. Rather than treating viruses as isolated incidents, he recognized them as an evolving threat requiring constant vigilance. The company he founded, McAfee Associates, grew into a cybersecurity giant that continues to protect millions of devices worldwide, even though McAfee himself sold his stake in 1994 and later became one of the software's most vocal critics. The cybersecurity industry that McAfee helped create is now worth hundreds of billions of dollars globally. His early innovations established a framework for how we think about digital threats and protection, a legacy that extends far beyond the controversial figure he later became. In his later years, McAfee reinvented himself as a cryptocurrency evangelist, becoming one of the most vocal and controversial promoters in the space. His infamous prediction that Bitcoin would reach $1 million by the end of 2020, backed by a bizarre promise to eat his own penis on national television, if wrong, exemplified his flair for outrageous publicity. McAfee charged up to $150,000 per promotional tweet for cryptocurrency projects, wielding his influence to boost obscure tokens and projects. While some viewed him as a visionary who recognized the revolutionary potential of blockchain technology, others accused him of running pump and dump schemes that enriched him at the expense of his followers. Yet beneath the promotional bluster, McAfee's advocacy for cryptocurrency was consistent with his libertarian philosophy. He saw Bitcoin and privacy-focused coins as tools for escaping government surveillance and control weapons in his ideological battle against what he perceived as encroaching tyranny. Few tech entrepreneurs have captured the public imagination quite like John McAfee. His larger-than-life persona, outlandish behavior, and willingness to share the most intimate details of his life made him a cultural phenomenon. He appeared in documentaries, podcasts, and news programs, not just as a tech expert, but as a character, sometimes hero, sometimes villain, always compelling. The Dangerous Life of John McAfee portrayed him as a dangerous figure, implicated in dark activities during his time in Belize. McAfee vehemently denied the allegations in the film, but the controversy only added to his mystique. He became a symbol of tech world excess, a cautionary tale about genius untethered from restraint. In the age of social media, McAfee became something of a meme himself. His outrageous tweets, bizarre lifestyle claims, and defiant stance against authority resonated with internet culture. He represented a kind of digital outlaw archetype, someone who understood the systems of control and refused to be bound by them. The persistence of conspiracy theories surrounding McAfee's death reflects not just the circumstances of his demise, but the nature of the man himself. Throughout his life, McAfee blurred the lines between truth and performance, between genuine paranoia and calculated provocation. He was a man who thrived in ambiguity, who understood that mystery is often more powerful than clarity. Like other larger-than-life figures, whose deaths have generated conspiracy theories, from Elvis Presley to Jeffrey Epstein, McAfee created a persona so outsized that a conventional end seemed incongruous. The conspiracy theories about his death are, in many ways, the story of a man too extraordinary, too dangerous to power structures, to simply die by his own hand in a prison cell. Moreover, the theories reflect the themes McAfee championed in distrust of official narratives, skepticism of government authority, and the belief that powerful interests operate in the shadows. Whether these theories are true or not, they resonate because they align with the worldview McAfee spent years promoting. What is certain is that John McAfee lived and died as he chose, defying convention, challenging authority, and leaving behind a legacy as complex and contradictory as the man himself. From the traumatized boy in Virginia to the NASA programmer, from the antivirus pioneer to the fugitive in Belize, from the presidential candidate to the cryptocurrency guru, McAfee reinvented himself time and again, always one step ahead of his pursuers, always pushing boundaries, always seeking freedom on his own terms. In the end, perhaps the most fitting epitaph for John McAfee comes from the man himself, words he wrote years before. What kind of world do you want to live in? A world where someone can be arrested for claiming that taxation is theft? Or a world where we're free to express ourselves without fear of imprisonment? Mathematician, programmer, entrepreneur, fugitive, prophet, outlaw. A man who saw the digital future before anyone else, both its promise and its perils. A man who built an empire on our fears, then spent the rest of his life running from his own. A digital ghost in the machine, impossible to fully capture or understand. In the end, John McAfee remains an enigma, a brilliant technologist who became increasingly detached from the industry he helped create, a wealthy entrepreneur who rejected conventional comfort for a life of adventure and risk, a libertarian who ran for president while fleeing tax authorities, a privacy advocate who lived his life in the public eye. The truth about John McAfee, both his life and his death, may never be fully known. Perhaps that's fitting for a man who made a career of challenging our assumptions, who found freedom in reinvention, and who understood better than most the power of a good story. In a world increasingly defined by digital footprints and surveillance, McAfee managed to remain unknowable, his final and perhaps most significant act of defiance. The most interesting thing about John McAfee wasn't how he lived or how he died. It was how he forced us to question the systems we take for granted, the truths we accept without evidence, and the freedom we surrender in the name of security. In that questioning lies his true legacy.